Healing begins in the soul. When a person preserves love, the spirit is healed. It is essential to treat one's feelings gently and trust them. With proper breathing techniques, all diseases can be cured. Self-healing implies eliminating harmful habits. Living by one's true feelings here and now, and trusting one's soul means that even self-isolation can be natural. So, let's try to sort out all the facts and details. Let's start with this. A human being is not just a body and a consciousness. He is what we call the subconscious or unconscious realm, as well as our spiritual energy body that continues to exist after death. And this is a fact that many understand. Our aura, in simple, even childlike language, our unconscious holds colossal information about the past, present, and future, constantly sending us signals that we may not hear or that are hard to perceive. Those who trust their feelings, who do not suppress them with bad habits, are the ones who can perceive these signals clearly. The body distinctly indicates what to eat, what to do, whom to meet, and with whom to part. Nature and the development of existence are like a dialectical test. To create a great painting, you need to approach it and notice an element of surprise. There must be a moment when something seemingly theological suddenly transforms into something new and unusual. That is the interplay between consciousness and the unconscious. When everything is already known to us, energy and opposites disappear. Our consciousness becomes closed off from our unconscious, which knows the future and much more. How can one hear the voice of one's soul, the voice of one's subconscious? One must treat one's feelings with care and trust them. First of all, do not overeat. Our feelings are primarily expressed through food, smell, touch, taste. If we mistreat ourselves, if we live in an atmosphere of constant conflict with heavy odors and consume just anything, eventually everything will fall apart. Therefore, smell your food. If you do not like its aroma, do not eat it. For example, squirrels were given GMO corn in the park. They nibbled only a little on the GMO, while the regular corn was entirely consumed. What did the squirrels rely on? Their senses. They trusted their feelings, which warned them that this was not fit to eat, that it was dangerous. In this way, a person can redevelop his ability to enjoy true taste sensations, the time when he had a clear understanding of what was permissible and what was not. Today, if you don't check what goes on the plate, you end up eating it all. Then come poisoning and other problems. On average, a person eats 404 times more than necessary. Imagine, we should only consume 1/5 of what we currently do. Indigested food is like poison. It clogs and contaminates the body, affecting both our health and our feelings. How can our feelings respond correctly if they cry out, "Don't eat that," while we continue out of habit or because we believe it is healthy? When a person is determined to trust his feelings, everything changes. Consider the simple commandment of Christ, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." This means that all the diets, advice, and similar measures pale in comparison to what our true feelings tell us about what, how much, and when to eat. Imagine sitting down to eat and asking your soul, "Do I really want this?" And soon, you begin to understand what is appropriate and what is not. Your gut will advise you. There are countless documented cases. People with incurable, fatal diseases gathered their money, abandoned everything, and went on a final journey only to return healthy. Why? Because they did what they truly wanted. They followed not their stomach or base animal instincts, although we often equate these with human nature, but their Suland they healed. I recently spoke with a woman. I said, when a person has a strong intuition, they already know what to do, which tickets to buy, and what to avoid. They conserve their energy. She replied, "Well, yes. Of course, people are less developed. Their intuition is weaker." I said, "That's not the point. It seems that if a person is less intelligent, their intuition is worse. But if they are smarter, since we link everything to intellect, they feel everything." And then I asked, "Do you think that elephants in Thailand were wiser than humans when, with passengers on their backs, they fled into the forest before a wave struck?" This is called intuition, which is not only inherent in humans, but even more so in animals. Sometimes fate offers us a hint, an opportunity not to be dismissed. A lady I know was vacationing in Thailand. If I recall correctly, She was supposed to leave on the 4th. I ordered a taxi for 8:40 a.m., and the driver arrived at 8:45. You see, she hadn't fully prepared, yet she still wanted to do something more. The driver said, "Don't worry, I'll wait 15 minutes. We have to leave at 9. I'll have some coffee meanwhile, so everything is fine." She thought and said, "You know what? Let's leave earlier." She got into the taxi, they departed, and 10 minutes later, a huge wave came and swept everything away. These are the nuances. When the voice of the soul speaks, it can be very subtle, but if you listen, it grows louder. Therefore, try to follow Christ's first commandments, and remember that our feelings are always wiser than our thoughts. No experience, thought, or book can be wiser than the deep feeling of love that encompasses everything. Thus, when a person trusts his feelings, he naturally supports himself. He understands that faith in God, love, prayer, kindness, and forgiveness nourish the soul, that above all, the soul must be healed. Then healing becomes possible in any case. Now, the question arises, how do I know if my feelings are deceiving me? Perhaps I suddenly feel like not going to work, but rather leaving for Bali or indulging in chip show. Do I discern this? The answer is that there is a difference between emotions and deep feelings. Emotions are the body's immediate reactions to the environment, while feelings endure and are easier to distinguish. For example, if I'm offered a candy, I simply need to restrain my craving and truly sense the sweetness. But if someone tells me, "You have a good job, you should leave it," and I don't feel a strong desire for change, the pleasure is not significant. That's entirely different. I once worked in Sochi, living a luxurious life as a tour guide with a high salary. Yet I felt the urge to move to St. Petersburg to work on construction. I ended up living in a dormitory, constantly risking my life, with issues as basic as food. In short, everything was extremely tough. I couldn't explain the intensity of that inner desire. It was strong and came from within. If it had been a mere craving for a candy, I would have sat on it for 2 or 3 days and then left. In the HR department, they said, "You won't last long here." I thought, why did not even one person from Sochi last more than a month? I worked there for 5 years. I recall a young Armenian guy coming into our dorm room saying, "I'll work here. The salary is low, 120 rubles. My parents will send me 300. I'll manage somehow." He probably managed for 1 day and then left. Thus, if a person is guided by the feelings of love and is, consciously or unconsciously, a believer, his feelings give him the right cue, and he trusts them to achieve his goals. But if there is little love and little faith in God, one increasingly depends on momentary feelings, which can lead to mistakes. One can judge whether a feeling is good or bad primarily by the person's aspirations, his true goals, and how he evaluates a situation. As soon as you start worshiping something other than God, you begin to lose proper orientation, as if you put an axe next to a compass. Let's reason logically. How do we heal the body? The most well-known mass methods for restoring health are elementary. Essentially, it is about limiting bodily functions. Fastingas, an Indian proverb, Goscan, cure many diseases, and breathing techniques can cure all diseases. What does this mean? For example, why does the bottle method work so effectively? In my view, the bottle seems to think that carbon dioxide provides health. If one breathes in an oxygen deficit, the carbon dioxide somehow helps one heal, but then it would be simpler to just administer carbon dioxide, and the person would get well. Yet that does not happen. In reality, when breathing is limited, and breathing air provides oxygen and energy, a need for energy arises, and there must be a switch from consuming oxygen energy to using the subtle energy that we receive through our soul. In other words, faith must intensify subconsciously, and then the person receives the energy he lacks. The same process occurs through fasting. The person renews himself, energy flows in, and he heals. Fasting restricts the external energy and forces the development of an inner energy need. Simultaneously, faith in God strengthens, especially when one prays, rejoices, and is not embittered or depressed. When a person fasts amid stress and discontent, he quickly falls ill, and Daesh's fasting becomes his undoing. Therefore, restricting the body through fasting sexual restraint, and controlled breathing yields almost miraculous results and cures nearly all diseases. In limiting the body, we strengthen the spirit. So, how do we heal the spirit? Exactly in the same way, by limiting the spirit. Spiritual moments pertain to the future, to consciousness. If we quiet our consciousness, if we remain silent for more than 6 days, if we cease planning for the future, we free up a vast amount of energy that restores us. Constant worry about the future, regrets about the past, and irritation with the present cause heavy illnesses because of the tremendous energy drain. What does it mean to limit or constrain the spirit? It means not thinking about the future, not regretting the past, not making any plan, simply living by one's inner feeling here and now, trusting the soul. On the other hand, forced restriction of the spirit equates to betrayal, a collapse of ideals and hopes for the future. If a person preserves love, his spirit is healed. The main thing is healing the soul, and everything depends on it. The soul is healed by limiting its functions. This means restricting sexual urges, or, more accurately, favoring friendship over mere physical relations, forgiving those who have hurt you, and generally curbing the impulses of life. This is what we call higher yoga, when a person concentrates on the divine and halts all desires. For all our desires are linked to the soul. Desire is energy. It is time. Therefore, one who can limit the body and endure physical pain can also limit the spirit and endure spiritual pain, the collapse of the future, injustice, etc. One who can limit the soul in various pleasures, who can bear the pain of betrayal and hurt from loved ones, ultimately preserves love and builds a chain of health. By restricting all functions of the body, we transfer the load to the spirit. By limiting the spirit, we turn to the soul. By harmonizing and limiting the soul, we move toward love for God, for our true self. And when this divine, soulful, spiritual, and material chain works in unison, there is a constant flow of energy from above, and we enjoy health, prosperity, intuition, everything. But if one channel is blocked, say, two work fine while health still fails, if a person cannot accept the pain of the soul, if he doesn't want to live when his loved ones hurt him, if he cannot forgive his beloved, then a spike occurs, and the spirit and body begin to suffer. The spirit, also tied to destiny, starts to fall apart, and illness sets in. I have observed that when a person cannot preserve love, when the body, spirit, and soul are humiliated, simplest test is this. No one passes the test of the soul, and then disasters begin. It is a constant accumulation of aggressiveness and a gradual blockage of both spiritual and physical potentials. The blockage of spiritual abilities is seen in children who cannot or do not want to learn. The physical aspect is evident in the near absence of healthy newborns, leading to widespread infertility. It's that simple. Thus, if a person wants to engage in self-healing, he can drink any herbal remedies, follow his desires, detach from the unnecessary. By the way, harmful habits drain a lot of energy, so self-healing also means eliminating them. But most importantly, one must properly structure one's worldview and understand that without love, without faith in God, without the proper balance of priorities, nothing will work. I once spoke with a woman who had problems in her personal life a result of fibroids. She began reading my book so intensively that she melted away. She said the doctors were shocked. Later, she met a man. A romance ensued, and they eventually separated. It seemed normal. She said, "Perhaps I had low self-esteem. I thought poorly of myself." During her menstrual cycle, she experienced uncontrollable bleeding. She called, crying, "What should I do?" I told her, "Your self-destructive program is activated. The cause is dissatisfaction with yourself, with fate, and negative thoughts about yourself. Pray, and by the next day, everything will pass." It's elementary otherwise. Who knows how many drugs and treatments would have been used? We can hardly imagine how our emotions affect our health and how quickly things can be restored if we follow the right path. One must understand that when a person turns to God and repents, it is not begging for health. It requires the desire to change and a commitment never to repeat the mistakes. One must clearly understand that such behavior sinking into despair and condemnation is not the answer. I recall an incident from 10-15 years ago. My wife and I were on vacation abroad, and we agreed to meet at a supermarket in 15 minutes. I arrived, but my wife was nowhere to be seen. She didn't call. I thought, maybe I shouldn't call either, and waited another half hour. Eventually, I became mildly angry, thinking, I can call her, why isn't she calling? She's late. She should have called. The word should creates an expectation that leads to many ailments. In the end, when my wife arrived, I said, why didn't you call? What are you doing? I was visibly shaken. Not as much as someone who writes books these days, but then, details aside, I was upset. She replied, my phone was acting up. Did you not call? No, I didn't. Later, I came home carrying a small outboard motor, which I had been moving with one hand. Suddenly, while handling the motor, a pain shot through my back. I set the motor down and left. It was time to travel to Russia. The next day, on a train, my back ached so much that I couldn't lie down comfortably. The pain intensified over 2 days. Upon examining my back, I discovered a growing, large, herniated disc that made it nearly impossible to lie flat. I improvised by rolling up a towel and placing it under the affected area to lie down. Then I realized that I was on the path to becoming disabled. These processes began when I could barely walk, and I quickly understood that it was my resentment toward women. I began to forgive my wife, and not merely forgive, but to understand that I was wrong, that I should not force events to unfold according to my own will, since events unfold as God wills them. Soon the pain eased within 3 days, and I no longer dwelled on it, even though she eventually left. Later, I advised people who came to me with 3 or 4 herniated discs, listen, ladies, you sit here, and in 2 hours, Yulia will come in. Why did you come to me? You aren't working on yourself. At best, one issue might pass, but the hurt remains. If you don't understand, then move on. Yet, they were intimidated, realizing that I saw what needed to be done. One must work on oneself relentlessly. Eventually, things settled, and they said, children, everything is fine, but often people fail to connect their emotions with their illnesses, and overcome the emotions sink deeper while remaining on the surface, making them easier to pull out if addressed promptly. However, if months pass, then one must confront that the deeper the emotions, the more work on oneself is required, repentance, or confronting them head on. Many say, I have repented of my resentments. But where do new resentments come from? I say they are not new, but old ones reignited. If you keep winding your life up, you will keep unwinding it. In the same way, the laws remain the same, and you must always start from the beginning. Healing always begins with the soul, with love and acceptance of divine will. When we turn away from love, when we refuse to accept what has happened and, instead, wallow in regrets about the past and fear of the future, we create an aggression against time, a fundamental force in the universe, and no pill can fix that. Therefore, always start with the essentials, with the simplest truth, so you can truly feel it. I say, to heal, to be healthy and happy, one must follow a system of priorities that looks like this: divine, human, divine. The first reaction to any event must be a response of love. I recently spoke with a friend who asked, what if someone attacks you with a bat? I replied, the very first reaction to any event must be love and the acceptance of divine will, even, if only for a split second before everything else, because miracles happen only when the initial reaction is love. I gave an example. A woman described how a bus ran over the leg of a 5-year-old girl, stopping on it. In any adult, that might have led to severe injury, but she felt no fear. Only a profound inner sensation, exactly as I describe. And when she arrived at the hospital, there were no fractures, no cuts, no internal bleeding. How could this be? I thought that perhaps she had allowed herself to be spared because she forgave her husband. She initially responded to all problems with love before everything else. The point is, each of us faces a choice, a higher judgment, left or right. The first emotion that arises in response to an unpleasant situation can be aggressive. That means one's ego and aggressive consciousness are more important. But if the first emotion that arises is love, then God and love are paramount. Everything else follows.